People of the channel, I have been away in the cold place. I'll put together a video on that as soon as I can manage. The place? Canada, and I mostly tried not to fall through ice into a large lake. And you see there's dark marks there, that's where I went through the slush. I'm not going back over there to film it, that's for sure. I'll wrench you away from that stunning sunrise and to this bright orange delight. And today about his pet drone. I've been dabbling with flying various Mavic drones for a few years in various parts of the world, and I'm far from an expert, but I'm cautious about drone footage overuse in short films. That said, rewind a few months to halfway through last summer's voyage legs up the British coastline. We were passing the Farne Islands, and I did want to fly the drone. The sea was friendly, as was the wind. So I had a list of basic aerial clips I wanted to use as B-roll across the two halves of that duo of films, and also of the islands themselves. My Mavic Air 2 took to the air for about half a second or so, then a little wobble from Alan, and the drone shifted slightly right, and, well, it was brutally assaulted by the railings. I quickly looked out of the hatch, but it had sunk like a stone. Let's see that again. A sad moment for sure, and I didn't even capture the tragedy from another camera angle. In fact, this footage the next day was captured by a generous volunteer lifeboatman further up the coast. Okay, so we need a plan, and I know just the man to explain. Greetings. So the drone that I used to have, which was a DJI Mavic Air 2, it and I had a slightly mixed relationship, sometimes tempestuous, sometimes it did what it was supposed to do, but yeah, it was a mixed one. Anyhow, that did not mean that I believed that it deserved to die a grisly death in the North Sea off the Farne Islands. So I have a new drone now. I've been getting some footage up in northern Canada, which has been very cool, but also of course I need to make sure that I can get some footage from Alan too, because that adds to production value and it means that we're more likely to dominate YouTube in the coming months. Anyway, what I don't want to do is lose the drone in the water again, and so I've come up with a plan for both taking off and landing. Now, taking off, this is the idea that I've come up with. It's basically a helipad, a drone pad. It is a piece of board with two rubber areas which should provide a bit of extra friction so that the little feet of the drone don't slide around too much. Anyway, that's not going to just sort of sit on a deck or anywhere. That's going to sit on top of both the taking off and the landing device, which is basically a large net, and this should be able to span across the railings up on deck, and it will have a bit of a droop. I don't want it to be too taut. It's not for bouncing the drone off, it's for catching the drone. So what I'm going to do is clip this up there, as large a surface area as I can manage, and then in the middle, when we're taking off, I'm simply going to place this board down so that the drone can take off from a flat surface. Then once it's in the air, I can remove this, and then it will just be the net catching the drone when it comes into land. Of course, I am going to test this before we go in the water, and in fact before I even mount it up there, we'll mount it nice and down low to make sure that the net catches the drone without damaging it. Anyway, I reckon this will be a good solution. Let's see how it goes. There's only one drone at stake. An unused boat cradle nearby, perfect to stand in for Alan's railings, but without the 10-foot drop. I already thought it's possible that this net might be suboptimal, as the elastic is very elastic and might droop excessively even with a modest weight placed on top. But we forged ahead for test number 1. As you can see, the takeoff plate sits there stably enough, but it was pretty hard to keep it flat. No problem, I guessed, as I assumed the various gyros and enormous brain power of the Mini 3 Pro would account for that. Off we go. I'd hoped for better. I wasn't entirely sure what had happened to catch a rotor, so let's have a look in more detail after I'd triaged from a distance and decided to stop the camera recording before going to its rescue. In fact, the drone did exactly what it was supposed to do. It immediately corrected the slant on takeoff. That meant that the rotor hit the edge of the plate, then the net, and the rest I guess I'll include in the report to the Air Accident Investigation Branch and my inevitable prosecution. The onboard view offers nothing of substance, but it's encouraging that even when trapped, the drone still tried to free itself. It did not fall through the net. I went for a temporary, larger, flat platform, still with a slant, but less of one. Test number 2. You'll have heard that the rotor still scuffed the cardboard as the drone instantaneously corrected the slant once it went airborne. So we may need to take off from a wide platform, or one that's actively damping the rolls of Alan whilst afloat, or any motion in the elastic net. I thought that I might as well go for a short fly around, and as luck would have it, we're located a few hundred yards outside the restricted zone around Edinburgh Airport, so it's not a blanket no-fly zone for drones. And because this new drone is classed as a micro drone, you don't have the additional rules and regs that heavier drones are bound by. It's probably just as well that by late spring we'll be setting back into action north from here, hoping to reach the Shetland Islands well before the summer itself arrives. We don't want to run out of time and good weather this year. The main reason is that otherwise you'll all petition for my arrest if I show you any more clips of these bridges. Let's come back and land and see if the net is going to do a reliable job of catching this little guy, but not before I remember to remove the takeoff pad. Not so good. Rather like, or perhaps conversely, to how a mouse can squeeze through gaps apparently smaller than themselves, our drone didn't collapse itself, but rather it pushed aside the netting to fit through the gap. Well, we did land, I suppose. Let's see again. In fact, it catches on a netting hook and then flips down through the gap, pushing a way through with its 249 grams of bulk. Okay, so the drone is absolutely fine, but it just fell through the gaps. I need a tighter mesh on my net. The good news is that the rotors didn't seem to worry at all, but if we're going to mount a net up here, it needs to be substantially different. It needs to be larger, or longer at least, to account for inevitable pilot error on my part. The mesh also needs to be a lot finer, perhaps 30mm gaps and not 100mm gaps. It needs to be stiffer and less elastic, especially for takeoff, but not rigid, otherwise it won't catch and safely envelop the drone. Anyhow, as an initial concept, I'm happy with it, and it seems much safer than grab nets, lassos, or trying to hand launch and hand recover them over the side of the boat. As you can see, I'm not the only one this has happened to. Interestingly, we both reacted in exactly the same way. Sadly, insurance companies and even specific drone fly-away policies have increasingly made it pretty much pointless or unaffordable to insure for this sort of loss, so we must try and stop the accidents happening at source. Otherwise, the ocean seabeds will be carpeted with the hopes and dreams of disappointed drone owners. Something else quickly. When I made the rubber friction drone pad, I envisaged getting another Mavic Air. Sadly, the Mini series has their feet located very differently and less widely, so it's not holding position that well as I expertly simulate the rocks and rolls of life on the ocean waves. When I finally get round to manufacturing the stern platform, this might be a better area from which to launch and recover the drone. What do you think? Any other design ideas? That's all for this weekend, but I'm back on Allen duty near full time, and we will triumphantly face this New Year's things to do /finish /make work list with a humour that'll keep us all sane. In the meantime, do become a member or a proud t-shirt, hat and book owner please. Bye.